Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Rod Rosenstein, the man who oversees the Russia probe, reportedly secretly discussed recording conversations with the president.
This is a bombshell. If this New York Times story is true that the Deputy Attorney General...
Rod Rosenstein considered invoking the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office.
I have a message for the president tonight. Under zero circumstances should the president fire anybody. These actors tonight, and I have multiple sources confirming this and more information coming, they are hoping and praying that the president does just that.
But if you were laying a trap for Donald Trump, this might be exactly how you do it. Before moving forward, the president might ask himself, why do Andy McCabe and the New York Times want me to fire Rod Rosenstein? And why do they want me to do it now rather than a year ago? When your enemies give you political advice, it's worth asking questions like that.
If the New York Times reporting is accurate, the president tonight should seriously consider whether Rod Rosenstein should remain on the job. We just cannot have this plotting at the highest levels of the Justice Department against the chief executive of this executive branch.
Sweet Jesus.
Oh, my God. Happy Monday. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. All right. So, obviously, the strategy this morning with the Rod Rosenstein was to react to the Friday New York Times bombshell that says that Rod Rosenstein at times sarcastically suggested that basically what we have is a president who nominates a sexual predator to the highest court in the land and a deputy attorney general who thinks the president is too insane to run the country. And he gets his advice off of Fox News, a vowel movement away from it, what it does to the news. All right. All right. So the president goes golfing over the weekend. Doesn't react at all to the story in the New York Times that Rod was apparently either sarcastically saying, this man is insane, or seriously saying, this man is insane, and we really should put a wire on somebody when he interviews the next FBI director. Right? Because he's crazy. So either it's true or it's not true. This thing, we don't know. Rod says it ain't true. The New York Times says, oh, yes, it is. We've got it from people who were in the room. Maybe you sarcastically said it one time, but a couple of times you were dead serious because this guy is bat crap, okay? So the president doesn't react to any of this until after this long-ass weekend. This weekend was really stinking long and not relaxing long. I mean, I just can't even explain to you how freaking wild this weekend was. It was so crazy. And why? Well, there were personal things that were going on in my life that I'm too embarrassed to tell you about. I'll tell you in 36 years. Because that's how violated I felt. But I got to say, that apparently over the weekend, a ton of news stories broke. I don't know it's like Friday night is the new Monday. So, the president doesn't say anything about the Friday report in the New York Times until Monday. And then all of a sudden this morning, not really early. I mean, I was up at about 7. It didn't start till about after 10 or something. I forget the timeline, but it was like after 10, there started to be rumors. Rod Rosenstein was fired. Rod Rosenstein is resigning. Which is it? Is he resigning? Is he, being fired? Oh, well, let me tell you the difference. And, we had all these legal experts. Thank you for explaining to me what the difference is. Apparently, if he got fired, that would cause a report to be generated by Bob Mueller. And that report would not only go to the White House and to the acting director, acting deputy director, who would be our Solicitor General, Francisco, Rodriguez? Our Solicitor General, Francisco Rodriguez, right? I want to say Rodriguez. I don't know. Anyway, not only would a report go to him and he would get to decide, but it would also go to the House and the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman or Judiciary. Noel Francisco. Oh, Francisco's his last name. Oh, Noel. Merry Christmas. Your mother really liked the holiday, didn't she? Wow, that's beautiful. But anyway, so the reports would go to the Republicans in the House and the Senate, right? And they would know everything. So it was interesting for a brief moment. But then all of a sudden it hits you. It hits you like a ton of bricks when finally Sarah Huckabee Sanders brings a cleansing moment of clarity. And when you're getting your cleansing moment of clarity from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you know it's a setup, okay? And that's what this was, okay? Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she tweeted that whatever is going to happen to Rod isn't going to happen until Thursday. Well, it turns out over the weekend that you've got Dr. Ford, Christine Blasey Ford, agreeing. I mean, Grassley is like pressuring this woman and just, boxing her. Here's my ultimatum. I need to know by 10 o'clock Friday night. 10 o'clock Friday night. Close of business, 10 o'clock, something like that. They go, okay, we will testify. Okay, I'll give you till 2:30 Saturday. Okay, we will testify. 10 o'clock Saturday night. Okay, we will testify. But you know what? She'll give her firsthand information to your committee. They don't say exactly how, but they say she will, because they won't say who's doing the interview. They won't do a FBI investigation, which was part of her demands. Please just do a quick cursory FBI background investigation into this, okay? They won't do it, and they won't say who's going to question her. Some of them are too scared to have these 11 aging, seriously conservative, stupid, ignorant of anything women are about men question her aggressively, because it'll look like really stinking bad. So then they're thinking, oh, we'll get a female staffer. No, we'll get a female prosecutor. No, not a prosecutor, because that's going to look too much like a trial. This is a hearing, not a trial. And this isn't if it was a trial, she'd get to bring witnesses, and we can't have that, right? So they don't know what they're doing. So this is Saturday. All of a sudden, we get a couple of stories. On my Twitter feed, I've been tweeting about this guy, Ed Whelan. Ed Whelan, just for those of you who really give a rat's ass about who these people are and how they're all connected. The story of Kavanaugh lying under oath is something that really bugs me, because it has happened. It's on videotape. It's documented. And what does it have to do with? Let's refresh. Orrin Hatch had a counsel, a lawyer, working on his staff named Manuel Miranda. Manny Miranda. And Manny Miranda was receiving stolen documents from Democratic staffers when they were confirming Bush's various nominees. Priscilla Owens and Erica, I always call him Eric Estrada. You know who I'm talking about, right? And so they were, they were following money to try and see if Priscilla Owens had been paid by these uber right-wing conservative groups in order to influence her decisions on things about women's health, right? And so they were following the money, and Manny was getting these stolen documents and passing them on to Brett Kavanaugh by email. And we know that because we now have seen the emails. This happened for 18 months in 2002 to 2003. And back then, Kavanaugh was nominated for the D.C. Circuit. That confirmation took 2 long years because he kept denying that he was receiving these memos, and everybody was looking for this email. We finally got the email in 2018, and they tried to hide it. They tried to hide the sausage, right? They tried to hide the, how it was made and that he got the stolen material and all that crap. Well, it turns out they got the emails. The Democrats did. The Republicans saw them too. And they were all coming from Orrin Hatch's staffers. Well, what's really interesting is that over the, last couple of weeks, Orrin Hatch was the first one out the door with this, theory that, something happened to her, but she's got the wrong guy. She's mixed up. This was their trial balloon that they floated, okay? And Orrin was the first person to float it, as you know.
Do you think that any of these claims are legitimate?
No, I don't. I think this woman, or whoever she is mixed up, but I can't speak for her. All I can say is, no, I don't. I know the judge very, very well. I know how honest he is. I know how straightforward he is. I know how he stands up for what he believes and what's right. And frankly, if you were going to believe anybody, you'd believe him.
If you were going to believe anybody, you'd believe him. But he lied under oath to Orrin Hatch.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with any documents that appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
No, I was not aware of that matter ever until I learned of it in the media late last year.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with information that you believe or were led to believe was obtained or derived from Democratic files?
No. Again, I was not aware of that matter in any way whatsoever.
Okay, so that's his testimony in 2004 to Orrin Hatch. Here's Ted Kennedy questioning him about this.
The documents that were taken here from the committee, and that you have the familiarity, Miranda documents. And you've indicated that you, in reviewing them, had no understanding or awareness that they had been taken, been stolen. Have you ever gone back now that you are aware of it and seen what decisions you may or might not have taken on the basis of documents that were illegally taken, to see whether you may have made some judgments or decision or reached certain conclusions now that you know that they were not properly taken? Have you ever thought, well, I ought to go back. I might have made some judgments or decisions when I was working for the president, and I ought to take a look at this since you know that these documents now were taken? Have you ever thought about that?
Senator, there's a very important premise in your question that I think is incorrect, which is I didn't know about the memos or see the memos that I think you're describing. So I think. Oh,
you never saw any of those?
No, Senator, that's correct.
I never saw any of those. That's correct, Senator. I never saw any of those, right? And then Patrick Leahy in 2018, finally, after all these long years, has the emails that Manny Miranda copied Brett Kavanaugh on.
Did Mr. Miranda send you an email asking you why the Leahy people were looking into her financial ties?
Priscilla Owens.
Is that what this email is?
I'm just asking you.
Well, can I take a minute to read it?
Of course.
Okay.
And this incident was 4 days before her hearing on July 23rd.
4 days before. From Manny Miranda to Don Willett to Nathan Sales to Steve Cobell and to Brett M. Kavanaugh.
Did I send any of the emails on this chain? I don't think so.
You got the documents.
I think I'm CC'd.
Look at Don McGann's face. Uh-oh. He's been lying.
In any event, if he said, why are the Leahy people looking into this? From Manny Miranda. I don't really have a specific recollection of any of this, Senator, but...
Oh, he doesn't have a recollection. Well...
You had the full text of my letter in your inbox before anything had been said about it publicly. Did you find it at all unusual to receive a draft letter from Democratic senators to each other before any mention of it was made public?
To each other.
Well, the only thing I said on the email exchange, if I'm looking at it correctly, Senator, was who signed this, which would imply that I thought it was a signed letter.
It was sent to you. Were you surprised to get it? I mean, it's obviously a draft. It's got typos and everything else. Were you surprised the draft letter circulated among Democrats ended up
in your inbox?
In your inbox.
But
from Mr. Miranda.
I think the premise of your question is not accurately describing my apparent recollection or understanding of the time, because
Oh, that's a lot of words to say. Yeah, everybody does it now. I mean, it's just so we know he lied. Well, what's interesting is Manny Miranda worked for Orrin Hatch. Okay, got that? All right, so now over the weekend, or actually last week, we started seeing this guy on the Twitter. His name is Ed Whelan. And Ed Whelan works for this conservative think tank called, ironically, the Ethics and Public Policy Center. And guess who Ed Whelan used to work for? Orrin Hatch. He worked for Orrin Hatch for a good long time, almost the whole 90s. And then, after working for Orrin Hatch, like Manny Miranda, guess where Ed Whelan ended up? In the Bush White House, working alongside Brett Kavanaugh. You see how this all goes. So now Ed Whelan hears Orrin Hatch, or at least they're talking to each other because they're all buddies. So Orrin Hatch goes out and says, well, I think she's mixed up. I think she's got, and then everybody on Fox News was saying last week, oh, no, we think something happened to her. We just think she has the wrong guy. And Ed Whelan is on Twitter using Zillow and Google Maps and solving the mystery for you. The ex-Orrin Hatch staffer who worked in the White House with Brett Kavanaugh is solving the mystery for you by using Google Maps and Zillow, saying, this is the house where it had to have happened. And you know who lives in that house? A guy who looks just like Brett Kavanaugh. And accuses that guy that looks like Brett Kavanaugh of being the one who did this to Dr. Ford. Except Dr. Ford is friends with the guy that Ed Whelan fingered. And she said, that man is my friend. I even visited him in the hospital back in the day when he got ill. I don't know what he had, maybe appendicitis. She said, there is no way I would confuse them. Ed Whelan has now apologized, deleted these tweets, and offered to resign from the Ethics and Public Policy Center, this former Orrin Hatch staffer, former White House counsel, who worked beside Kavanaugh, and says, oh, no, I never talked to...
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
So I talked to him on the phone today.
And what did he say to you?
Well, he didn't do that. And he wasn't at the party. So, there's clearly somebody's mixed up.
He said he wasn't at the party that she's referring to?
Yeah.
And how long did you talk to him for?
Oh, 10 minutes or so.
And was he...
Could have been longer. I don't know.
Was he upset?
Yeah, I'd say he's upset.
Mm-hmm.
But he handled it well. He's a very strong, decent man.
And you believe him?
Yeah, I sure do.
Do you believe the accusers at all, or not?
Well, I think she's mistaken. I think she's mistaken something that I don't know. I mean, I don't know her.
I don't know her. I think she's mistaken. I think she's mixed up. I think she's got I think she has the wrong guy. And Ed Whelan, who used to work for Orrin Hatch, who worked with Kavanaugh at the White House, and now has been involved in advising Kavanaugh's confirmation effort and is very close friends with Kavanaugh, and also with Leonard Leo, who is the head of the Federalist Society, who's, responsible for, really suggesting this guy in the first place. Ed Whelan offers to resign from his position at the Ethics and Public Policy Center for putting out this ridiculous set of tweets that say, oh, I use Zillow and Google Maps, and this is the house, and that's the guy, and he looks just like Brett Kavanaugh. And everybody at Fox News is picking up on this thing, and they are just running with it. And it turns out that an hour and a half before Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's name was revealed, before her story was we knew her story, but we didn't know her name. But before her name was revealed, a White House spokesman knew her name. And it looks like Mr. Whelan was on her LinkedIn page about 90 minutes before her name was made public. So an hour and a half before her name was made public, he knew her name. Now, he swears, I wasn't talking to anybody at the White House. I wasn't talking to Kavanaugh. I didn't talk to anybody at the White House. I didn't talk to McGahn. I didn't talk to Orrin, you know, obviously, that's her name got leaked. So there you have it, you know, and this is just so bizarre. And they are all forming a circle with the mistaken identity strategy. And it was really, they were running with it and running with it and running with it. And they knew who she was. And they were on her LinkedIn page. And Raj Shah knew who she was because he called a number of Trump people to warn them about the upcoming story. Somebody familiar with the calls spoke on the condition of anonymity to the Washington Post and said, yeah, Raj Shah knew her name and that he disclosed Ford's identity to a number of people. Other White House officials, including Don McGahn, also made calls speaking on condition of anonymity. I've been listening to Trump all week. I'm sorry. Whelan did not respond to a request for comment, how he first learned of her identity. But Kavanaugh and his allies have privately discussed mounting a defense that would not question whether or not she believes this happened to her. In fact, they would accept that this happened to her, but instead they would raise doubts that Kavanaugh was the perpetrator. It says, in the wake of Ford's allegations, Kavanaugh told White House officials and Republicans on Capitol Hill. Listen to what I just said. Kavanaugh told White House officials and Republicans on Capitol Hill that it was potentially a case of mistaken identity. And that's when they all started coming out going, she's mixed up. Well, we think something happened to her. We just don't think he did it. Now, Whelan was a former Supreme Court clerk, just like Kavanaugh was a former Supreme Court clerk. I mean, these guys, they both served at the same time at the Bush White House. Kavanaugh was working in the White House counsel's office. Whelan was the principal deputy assistant attorney general for the Office of Legal Counsel, where all these really strange, decisions were made about the president can torture people and the president can render people and the president can warrantlessly wiretap people, right? Okay, that's who Ed Whelan is. He also worked for the Senate Judiciary Committee, worked for Orrin Hatch. From 1992 to 1995, he was a senior staffer to Senator Orrin G. Hatch. Somebody's mixed up, Hatch said. Somebody's mixed up. So there's that. And then, Ed Whelan just took down all those tweets, offered to resign. And you know what they said to him at the Ethics and Policy Center, the uber conservative? They said, just take a leave of absence. Let this all blow over. So he got to keep his job, even though he's deleted all these tweets saying it was mistaken identity. All right, so there's that story. Okay. And it's all coming from Orrin's office. It's always coming. Manny Miranda worked for Orrin. And Orrin asked the question about Manny Miranda initially. So Manny didn't give you anything, right? No, I didn't even know about it until after I read it in the press. Senator Ted Kennedy says to him in 2004. So, now that you know that these memos were stolen, maybe you would have made a different decision. Based on, these stolen memos. No, Senator, I never saw these stolen memos. Never saw them. Oh, you never saw them? No. And then in 2018, in this confirmation hearing, Leahy says, but those were my emails. And here they are between me and other people on the Judiciary Committee, two senators talking to each other. How'd they end up in your inbox? They were stolen. Leahy actually tells them they were stolen. He goes, well, I didn't know that. I had my recollection is. There's something wrong with the premise of your question, and my recollection doesn't recollect, okay. So there's all this. Okay. So that happens, and then we get the tentative deal on Saturday, okay? We get a tentative deal where Christine Blasey Ford's attorneys say she will testify on Thursday this week. And then this morning, we get a very disruptive news cycle, very disruptive, saying somebody leaks out that that Rod has quit. And then somebody else leaks out that Rod is being fired. And the whole media starts talking about Rod and what's the ramifications of Rod and what happens to Mueller and blah, 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 and this and that. And is this the Friday Night Massacre? And we have it. And all of a sudden, Sarah Sanders chimes in. No, it'll happen on Thursday. Then we find out from Gabriel Sherman, who's a really good reporter, that the big idea behind doing this today was to get the press to stop talking about Kavanaugh so much and to change the news cycle and to just talk about Rod Rosenstein to react to Friday's article. Why? Because the New Yorker drops a piece over the weekend. Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer is known to me. I've known Jane Mayer's reporting for, in fact, when I told you, the truth is a complete defense to anybody that sues you, right? And I told you I got sued by a defense contractor, big-ass defense contractor. And some of the reporting I relied on was hers. And she is accepted by the courts as being a fact-check journalist and that you can rely on the stuff she writes, okay? You can. It's been adjudicated, just so you know. Anyway, Jane Mayer is working with Ronan Farrow over at The New Yorker, and they dropped this article that is so unbelievable about a second woman coming forward. A second woman. That this claim, Christine Blasey Ford says she thinks she doesn't remember the exact year or time or place, but she remembers what happened. And that's very, very familiar to me. Okay, to remember where you were, or what happened to you, or but not to remember the date. Okay, things like that. So she thinks it happened in 1982. This woman believes that in 1983 or 84, during the school year between 83 and 84, when they were freshmen at Yale. Now Kavanaugh is now 18. He's an adult. And remember, Mazie Hirono asked him about being an adult and did anybody ever accuse you of anything sexually predatory or any? And he said, nope. Okay. But 83, 84, during the year, Kavanaugh was a freshman, and so was this other woman. Her name, and she put her name to it, is Dorothy Ramirez. Dorothy Ramirez is 53 years old today. She attended Yale with Kavanaugh. After she graduated Yale, she was a sociology and psychology major. And after she graduated Yale, she spent her entire career working for an organization that supports victims of domestic violence. So she actually told the story. At first, she was very hesitant to speak. She was scared. And Ronan Farrow was asked why was she hesitant, and he explains it.
With us, and thanks for helping us try to understand the reporting here, which is very much part of the pushback against these claims this morning. So let me go right at that first, because in the very second paragraph, I think it is, of this piece, you note that Ramirez was reluctant at first to characterize Kavanaugh and his role, but after 6 days of reassessing her memories and talking to lawyers, she felt confident enough to come forward. So what does that mean, that at first she was reluctant to say this happened this way, but after 6 days of thinking about it, she came forward?
So I think it's important to note this is behavior that is not atypical in cases of trauma, in cases that stem from claims many years ago, and in cases that involve heavy drinking, which she readily admitted this was. This is a woman who did not come forward with a press release. Her story was recounted unbeknownst to her, to senators who began looking at this claim, and she was placed at the center of a firestorm. The fact that she took several days to carefully think about whether she wanted to cast herself into this maelstrom is, I think, certainly, an acknowledgement of the fact that there were gaps in her memory, as is so often the case with traumatic memories influenced by alcohol, but also an indication of her extraordinary degree of caution. This is not a woman who appears to be behaving in a way that suggests she has an agenda, that suggests she's making something up. This is a woman who is being very judicious and conservative in how she renders this allegation.
All right, so that's Ronan Farrow explaining why she was reluctant and why she came forward. Her name was leaked. Her name was put out there, and senators had her name. So all of a sudden, she's getting all this unwelcome attention, is how she described it, and it prompted some difficult choices for her. And again, she was hesitant to speak publicly because, like Ronan Farrow says right there, she had been drinking at the time of the alleged incident. And in her initial conversations with the New Yorker, she was reluctant to characterize Kavanaugh's role. And then 6 days, she sat with her attorney. And then, they relived it. They got details from her. And then she felt confident enough in her recollections to say that she remembers. And she remembers exactly what happened. And what happened is really pretty vile. They were having a little dormitory party, and everybody was, playing some drinking game where they would choose somebody to take shots and stuff like that, and they kept choosing her, and they kept choosing her, and they kept choosing her, and she got really, really inebriated, and she remembers that that Kavanaugh exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party, thrust his penis in her face, and caused her to touch it without her consent. She pushed him away, and in the statement she wrote, Kavanaugh responded and said, this alleged event from 35 years ago did not happen. The other one did not happen either, right? He said, the people who knew me then know that this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple. I look forward to testifying on Thursday, the day that Trump's going to fire Rod Rosenstein. On Thursday, about the truth and defending my good name and the reputation for character and integrity I've spent a life building. It's a smear, he says. It's just crap. It's a coordinated smear by the Democrats. Ramirez actually said that when both she and Kavanaugh were freshmen at Yale, she was invited by a friend on the women's soccer team to a dorm party. She recalls that the party took place in a suite at Lawrence Hall, which is a part of Yale called the Old Campus. Not that I would know. She said we were sitting in a circle. People would pick who drank. Ramirez was chosen repeatedly, she said, and quickly became inebriated. At one point, she said, a male student pointed a gag plastic penis in her direction. Later, she said she was on the floor, foggy and slurring her words, as that male student and another stood nearby. Ramirez identified two male onlookers, but at her request, the New Yorker is not naming them. A third male student then exposed himself to her, quote, I remember a penis being in front of my face. I knew that's not what I wanted, even in that state of mind. That's not a real penis, she recalled remarking, and other students started laughing at her confusion, and they started taunting her, and they started engaging her and saying, kiss it, kiss it. And she said she pushed the person away, and she touched the penis in the process. Now, she's also raised a devout Catholic, and she said she was shaken. Quote, I wasn't going to touch a penis until I was married. I was embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated. And she remembers Brett Kavanaugh standing to her right, laughing and pulling up his pants. Quote, Brett was laughing. I can still see his face and his hips coming forward like when you pull up your pants. And she recalls another male student shouting about the incident. She said, quote, somebody yelled down the hall. Brett Kavanaugh just put his penis in Debbie's face. It was his full name, she said. I don't think it was just Brett. And I remember hearing and being mortified that this was out there. She acknowledges that there are significant gaps in the memories of that evening. And she would, she said if she ever gets a chance to present her story to the FBI or members of the Senate, she knows she will inevitably be pressed on her motivation for coming forward after so many years and questioned about her memory, given her drinking at the party. And yet, after several days of considering the matter carefully, she said, quote, I'm confident about the pants coming up, and I'm confident about Brett being there. She said the thing that stayed with her most forcefully is the memory of laughter at her expense from Kavanaugh and the other students. Quote, it was kind of a joke, and now it's clear to me it wasn't a joke. So Kavanaugh was 18. He was legally an adult when all this happened. The New Yorker explains how many people they've spoken to, eyewitnesses.
So we called several dozen classmates who were around at the time in general. Many didn't respond. Many didn't wish to comment. Several were working, in fact, with Brett Kavanaugh's team and signed on to a statement saying, you know, they didn't have direct knowledge of this, but they didn't think it was the kind of thing that he would have done, and we included that. It's worth noting that half of that list either were individuals she said were directly involved in this, were people who egged Brett Kavanaugh on as he did it, urging her to kiss it and other things, or the wife of one of those alleged assailants. But, you know, we did include those statements, and there were several others who were not alleged to be involved who said, you know, we trust Brett Kavanaugh on this. No direct accounts from that side. We did receive, however, several direct accounts from people who said they were told right after or saw her describing it right after, and who independently of Ms. Ramirez recounted the same fact pattern about Brett Kavanaugh doing this.
That's interesting, and that's something that doesn't always exist when you're dealing with allegations of sexual assault or allegations of sexual battery, correct?
I'm glad you make that point, John. This is a fairly high level of evidence for this kind of a case. When you look at the other reporting I've done, for instance, on sexual assault and harassment, the last story Jane Mayer and I did was about a Democratic politician, Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General. And, you know, we used the same caution and standards there. Very often there are not people in the room willing to speak in these cases. In this case, the primary people who were likely to be witnesses are people alleged to have been egging him on and to have been part of this, you know, alleged misconduct against her. Now, we held this to the same careful standard, but I would say that this exceeds the evidentiary basis that we've used in the past in several cases that were found to be very credible ultimately.
Okay, so this exceeds the level of evidence that Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer used when they were making allegations against the Democrat, Eric Schneiderman. Now, in this article, a classmate of Ms. Ramirez, who declined to be identified because of the partisan battle, said that a student told him about the incident on the night of the party or in the next day or two. The classmate said that he is, quote, 100% sure that he was told at the time that Kavanaugh was the student who exposed himself to Ramirez. This man independently recalled the same details independently of Deborah Ramirez. He wasn't told her story. They were not talking to each other, and described it exactly the same to Ronan Farrow and to Jane Mayer. He recalled the details that a male student had encouraged Kavanaugh as he exposed himself. So there are others, too. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.